And so what's been happening recently is that the speculators have been pushing up the prices of food because they know that the crops are going to be far below average this year because of the drought in the United States primarily, and also problems in Russia. So the price gets to a much higher level than it would be otherwise due to the speculation. And in the meantime, the people who have to live on this, they're going to starve, or they're not going to be able to afford it. And so that's another area which should be regulated. You know, you shouldn't be allowed to, in my opinion, all these kinds of, it's basically a bet should not be allowed. I mean, I think it's okay for a farmer to sell his harvest in advance on the futures market to guarantee the price. But he has an underlying interest in that. That's okay. But what's been happening is, over the last few years, is you've had other people who have no interest. You know, just Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs making bets with some of their customers as to where the food prices are going to be in 6 months. It's just a bet. It could just as well be a bet on a horse race. And it's the same with these so-called credit default swaps. I mean, there's so much of this going on now that we could easily have another financial crash. Yeah?
Yes, but another thing we have to think about that a farmer is not a farmer anymore.
Yeah, good point. It's a big corporation.
He has his machinery, he has his artificial fertilizers, and he has a lot of loan in the banks.
Yes.
And you see what happened in the United States with all the people who couldn't finance their houses.
Yeah.
What drove all things down. But today, the farmers, I mean, food is food. Yeah. And today the farmers are out of the, then the bankers will get problems there too. So they are making their own starvation, the banks. They rent out money, and secondly they say no, they're living weak, we have to rise the prices, or we have too much soybeans, that is lower the prices. They play with it like a game.
I agree.
They don't see lots of people, as families, that money, that's private economy. So I mean,
the whole system is rotten.
Yes, it's rotten.
Not only that, but
you know when it started at the moment when they began to make money out of the gold reserves.
No.
Because then it's a game. It's a game for people.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with you. The only thing I would mention that maybe kind of a good news is that if and when the peak oil hits us, it's going to probably bankrupt the big agriculture.
Yes.
Because all of their inputs are based on oil. And we hopefully will see a return to more local food production.
Yes, and that was the last thing I want to say. Start with your kitchen garden.
Okay, next one. Over here.
Well, it seems to me, to make it simple, that putting in corporate organizations and countries as opposed to each other. There's a hierarchy. That means there are a few people that are politicians, and there are a few people that are head of companies. You have no faith in that companies, although there are good people on the top, as you say, they just follow the market. You have faith in that politicians should be the ones who make a change. Countries and that means that 7 billion people have to make the right choice.
Well, I think I have more faith in politicians than I would in corporations, but of course politicians are not known to be always ideal. But I hope at least the kind of structure I've suggested here might be an alternative to the current structure, where you had some very high integrity people at the top who were able to give some direction to the entire planet's development.
So you think politicians are philanthropists?
No, but the people I'm talking about being elected, I wouldn't call politicians. They would be mostly people who have no longer any political or financial business interests. People who are retired people who have had a long career. I mentioned a person like Eric Daman as an example of that. And there are many others of that category, that level of integrity that I envisage were the kind of people I would complete trust in making major decisions about the entire direction of the entire plan, which way we're going. As opposed to these government appointees who are meeting in this Congress and making various kinds of resolutions. Yeah?
Yes. I'm back to the, what you call it, cooperation, the power in the US.
Corporatocracy.
Corporate integrity, yes, that's right. I don't think US and Norway and Netherlands is very different. I can't explain it, but not now. But if you say they are the power, and how shall it be possible to take that power away from them?
You can't.
No, but
Well,
if you...
the only way I'm envisaging it is as follows, is that in the longer term, you can't do it in the short term. But if such a small group of countries forms the Gaian League and presents it to the world as a possible model that could be in everyone's interests, then it is my hope that, and this would include the United States, that a lot of civil society members and more progressive parts of the business community would say to their politicians and to the corporatocracy, why are we not members? And then comes the push from below by the grassroots to say,
Yes.
we should be a member and try to force a referendum. They maybe have to sleep in the streets until they get it. But eventually, I think this is the way that we can take power away from them. It's from a powerful movement from below, but it has to have a simple issue that can be voted on, that everybody can stand behind. That's the big problem with the current way we're organized with the NGO. We're fragmented in thousands of small, single-issue problems, and there's no way you can unite them all behind a single question. But this is my thinking that this would be a simple, single question. Referendum, should it be joined or not? And that is my hope that that could ignite the interest of the entire civil society and, I think, a great part of the business community as well. And I don't think the corporatocracy could stand that kind of pressure. That's the way to take power from them, I think. It's a kind of a democratic revolution.
Yes. And I won't send the US Air Force.
Pardon?
And I won't send the US Air Force if somebody tried that.
They would have to send them to their own people. The biggest danger to the corporatocracy is not abroad, it's their own people. It's the American citizens. That's why they invest so much in homeland security. Yeah. Their military is not designed to defend them against China, it's to defend them against their own citizens. So they start waking up. Yeah?
Talking about corporations, there are also the international corporations like Monsanto, and like you said, this model was just for the States. I think it's for the whole world, because some of these big corporations are influencing the whole world, like Monsanto. What do you think about that? How to stop that?
Well,
you know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you have to imagine that these 6 countries, let's say, are 7 that form the Gaian League, but they're not going to allow Montana in at all. And their new trade regulations and capital control will just say, we don't want you.
You think that is needed?
Oh yeah, and they would maybe adopt some of the recommendations as Montana, Shiva, and others have suggested, that you can't take patents on living organisms. That's it. Anybody who does that is not welcome.
It's taking a long time.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to have this organization formed on the ground before you can do that sort of thing. But that's the way it would be done. And then you're just free of them. You know? Yeah.
This Tobin tax has been discussed a lot in the EU, and it was really, I think, on the agenda. It could have been implemented, maybe. What do you think, what would have been the consequences for all the speculations if it had been implemented just in the EU? Would it be like that every stock trade would go away from the EU? And what kind of consequences do you see upon that?
It would all depend on how it was formulated. But I believe there are ways to formulate it that would not be a problem. For example, I believe you could make it apply to any deal, whether it was done from the outside or from the inside the EU, which was, for example, on European stocks or bonds, would be subject to the tax. So there would be no advantage then moving abroad whatsoever. You would still be subject to the tax if it was on European stocks and bonds. So I think it's a question of how you formulate it. And I believe that I think the French have understood that. I think that's what they're doing, although I haven't seen the final proposal. The thing about the Tobin tax also is that originally the idea was to prevent currency speculation, but and particularly the kind of speculation we had in the 1990s when a number of countries in Asia had their economies completely destroyed by speculative capital coming in from the major American banks and European banks where they invested in securities in Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, and then they just pulled it all out suddenly, and that is what destroyed the economies. And so that was the reason some people were suggesting a Tobin tax could prevent that. But I'm saying, no, I couldn't have done that because the movements were too big. If you want to stop that kind of destruction, what you have to do is put capital controls on investment flows in and out. And that's one of the first things that any country should do if they want to take back control of their economies. In fact, it's written directly in the IMF charter, of which most countries are members, that in Article 6 it says directly, every country has the right to implement controls on capital flows. The problem is that when the IMF lends money these days, it often makes it a condition that you waive that right and allow free capital flow, which of course is basically giving power to the foreign bankers. Yeah?
Yeah, I want to go back to the corporations because you said you wanted this not to be included in the UN or any worldwide organization. So the question is, could it be established by some countries, even in Africa or in Asia or maybe in Europe, or the other solution would be that some corporations would actually understand that the global threat is so big right now, so some kind of connection must be made. And you said you think there are some corporate leaders, and we have some in Norway as well, with the conscience for green development. And so I'm being a politician myself. I know that politics takes a long time. So a solution for some few countries to make such an agreement sounds, for me, looks rather utopian. But we need a solution right now.
Well, why do you think it's utopian?
Because we are discussing maybe Norway could make such an initiative. We did it concerning landmines, and it took some years, but it actually became an international treaty which is operating right now. But I think the world situation as it is right now, economically and politically, is the energy and the task for coming to such an agreement, which takes too much time, too much
Well,
energy.
I certainly agree that it would take time. I don't imagine this happening quickly. If it were to happen, I think it would at least take a couple of years just to get a dialogue going among some potential candidate countries. And I think most of those countries are probably small developing countries like maybe Bhutan and Costa Rica. And some of these small, insignificant countries, but who have a level of consciousness where they really understand the problems that are facing us, and hopefully would be willing to take a position of leadership and say, look, we have to change, and so we're going to lead by example. We're going to say, we are going to do this. And that's a very powerful form of leadership. And it would attract a lot of attention, and that's my hope, that others would look at them and say, hey, look what these guys are doing. There is another way of doing things. And their corporations in these countries too could be models who would stand up and say to their friends abroad, hey, We support this. Why? Because they're operating on a level playing field. They have high standards forced on them, but they know that their competitors are being kept out by high tariffs, or maybe even told they're not even welcome. And so they are still able to make a profit, but in alignment with the needs of the environment. So I don't think it's all that possible. I do say it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen quickly. And even if such an organization, let's say within 5 years or so, it might form and get organized. That's probably an optimistic time frame. Even then, it's going to be a long time before it grows to the point where it becomes, significant. But so we're talking decades, probably, in terms of full development. And in a country like the USA and China, nobody can imagine them joining anything like that today.
We need to stop within at least 5 minutes or something like that. So because it's close to 9 now. But before maybe just to say a few words about since you're also so involved in the global eco-village movement. So how do you see that as relevant in also connecting with this? That's one thing. Just say a few words about that if you wish. And also, if you have just a few points about what would you suppose that we can do to help such a vision to be formed? What do you think could be the steps? Not a full plan, but just a few points as a kind of ending. If you know.
Then I'd like to play my song also.
Yes, sure. Sure.
Well, about the eco-village movement, one of the reasons that we supported the eco-village movement in Gaia Trust from the beginning was because we felt that this is another example of leading by a case of a leading by example. Because we were asking ourselves, how can we best support the movement towards sustainability? And should we do a think tank, or should we write a paper? Should we do advocacy? Whatever. Try to influence the politicians. And no, we came to the conclusion that the best thing we could do is to help the people who are actually doing it on the ground, who are actually walking the talk, who are actually through personal commitment, who are actually living the new paradigm. We're showing how it can be done. And so that's why we supported them. And I think leading by example is really the only kind of leadership that I really respect. And this is the same thing I'm saying about the Guy in League. By taking the lead and saying, we're going to do this, they're showing the rest of the world that we're going to do it. And we're going to be a good example. And you're welcome to join. It's the same way of thinking. As far as what you can do, I think it's a difficult question. I can't answer that shortly, but I can tell you that one of the things that I'm working on now with some international colleagues is to develop a kind of a political program for a country that supposedly wanted to shift from the current neoliberal type of economy to an ecological economics economy. What would be the steps that would be necessary? What are some of the issues that would have to be dealt with? Because I know that if this dialogue ever gets started between these different countries, that's one of the first questions that will be asked. And so I think it would be a good idea if we could establish such a document, or maybe several documents, by people who really understand these issues, so that we can have kind of a plan. But that's the sort of thing, any country could do that. You could do that here. It could be a good initiative for the Green Party, maybe, to say, supposing that the historic changes did decide that we want to become, adopt ecological economics and put sustainability at the top, what would we have to do over a period of, whatever, 10 years, 15, and develop a program? Maybe you have to convert to organic food production, 100%. Alternative energy, 100%. You're going to have to probably leave the WTO if you want to take control. You're going to have to put on capital controls, and all these kinds of things if you really want to control your economy. So, I mean, that sort of a plan could be a good project, I think, for you to think about. We're going to try to do it anyway, internationally in a general sense, so that we have kind of some bullet points to talk about at least. These are some of the things, maybe a checklist that you should think about if you want to really take this seriously. And now to round off, I'm going to play a little song. Well, I walked downtown to Zuccotti Park. It was 6 p.m. and getting dark when I saw a young couple chatting and drinking Cokes. I asked them what was going on here, and the young lady answered loud and clear, "We're here to send a message to our folks. This land was once the land of the free, of justice and democracy. Now America's lost her way and got off track. One man, one vote was the order then. Now our land's been stolen by the money men, and all of us here are just trying to get her back. Occupy New York City, occupy Santa Fe, occupy Cincinnati, occupy San Jose. We might be in Salt Lake City or in Washington, D.C., speaking out for human rights and more equality. The young man said his name was Bob, and recently he'd lost his job. His firm had pulled up stakes and moved offshore. They say it's cheaper in Shanghai, where profit rates are record high, and they don't pay much in taxes anymore. The 1%ers cheat and steal and don't produce a thing that's real. Asset speculation is their style. These guys are parasites, he said. They ought to get real jobs instead and make a contribution that's worthwhile. Occupy San Francisco, occupy Wichita, occupy Sacramento, occupy Omaha, occupy Minnesota, occupy Tennessee, standing up for nature and sustainability. Then I went to Europe to just check out what the Euro fuss was all about. The youth are without jobs, and that's the key. The young folks want their countries back, but leaders take a different tack. Bank bailouts and more austerity. The euro was a big mistake, a backdoor to a euro state that citizens would rather be without. The people want a deal that's fair, where bankers pay their rightful share. Until that day, they'll roam the streets and shout. Occupy Copenhagen, occupy Birmingham, occupy Londonderry, occupy Amsterdam. We are camping out in Athens as we make a final plea. We'd rather leave the euro than have more austerity. We will occupy Milan, occupy Luxembourg, occupy Barcelona, occupy this whole world. Now our numbers, they are growing, and we won't accept defeat. Time to end injustice, time to occupy Wall Street. Time to end injustice. Time to occupy Wall Street.